how are we going into this? How do you...
Well, I did chapter 3, so did Dane, so I don't know if you want to do
Okay,
it
well,
together
chapter
or-
3 is an important chapter.
Yeah. Okay. So, for me, the main thing that comes across is the seismic shift between, in our understanding of waves and particles, because Bohr really changed that. If you look at page 100.
See, we have a lot of questions about this, so now is the time to ask.
Well, he's...
Well,
Oh.
let's wait until Sophie finishes first, at least.
Okay, so in the second paragraph, he says, after all, she says, sorry, Barad says, but she's sort of talking about what Bohr discovered. After all, waves and particles are distinct phenomena with mutually exclusive characteristics. Particles are localized objects that occupy a given location at each moment in time. Waves have an entirely different nature. They're not even properly entities, but rather disturbances in some medium or field. Waves have extension in space, occupying more than one position at any moment of time, like ocean waves that move along a stretch of beach. And furthermore, waves can overlap, i.e. interfere with one another and occupy the same position at any moment of time, unlike particles. The dual nature of light and matter presented a quandary of the first order. An object is either localized or extended, it can't be both. So, then sort of Bohr goes on to talk about Planck's constant, which is symbolised by an H. And it's really, he's talking about this is sort of one of the most important parts of quantum physics. That's on page 108. And about halfway, so 3/4 of the way down, Barad says, in fact, this essential discontinuity is otherwise known in physics as Planck's constant, after its founder, symbolised by H, and it is indeed an extremely small quantity. This idea of an essential discreteness or discontinuous nature was initially introduced by Max Planck in 1900 in his attempt to account for some data on blackbody radiation, which would not yield classical physical analysis. In particular, he proposed that energy is quantisized and exchanged in discrete amounts. The fact that H doesn't equal zero, i.e. that the value of Planck's constant is not zero, marks the existence of a fundamental discontinuity of nature. The failure of Newtonian physics to take appropriate account of this discontinuity portends its downfall. So sort of all the way through the chapter, Barad is saying how Bohr is really tackling Newtonian physics and coming up with his own theories, like the theory of complementarity, which is opposed to Heisenberg's theory. And he actually he disagreed with Heisenberg so much. I actually went and watched the film of Copenhagen, which was really good. It was the one with Daniel Craig in it. It was very much like a play, though. It was done. There were only the 3 characters, and they were just set in the house. So it was very much a sort of play being translated into film. But at one point, Heisenberg gets really angry because he says to Bohr, "But you disagreed with my theory on uncertainty." And he said, "Yes, because you had faults." And so he made Heisenberg write this postscript to his thesis, to his theory, which has somehow been forgotten about, but it actually changes his position on uncertainty, and that's on page 117. I thought that was really interesting, what Heisenberg wrote. He says, "In this connection, Bohr has brought to my attention that I have overlooked essential points in the course of several discussions in this paper. Above all, the uncertainty in our observation does not arise exclusively from the occurrence of discontinuities, but is tied directly to the demand that we ascribe equal validity to the quite different experiments which show up in the corpuscular theory on one hand and in the wave theory on the other hand, i.e. that we acknowledge complementarity, that is, the necessity of considering mutually exclusive experimental conditions." And I think Bohr sort of explained his theory really well when he drew a picture, and that's, just see where, page 1, going back to page 112, and he uses a photographic plate and a flashlight, and he talks about the way that there's differences if the photographic plate doesn't move, then he's sort of drawn a rigid support for position and a movable support for momentum, and he says how you get different outcomes from the two things. So you can't really measure. You can't measure it when it moves. You can't do the two things at once. Take the measurement and understand it. So, and then when he presented his theory of complementarity, a lot of physicists thought that he was a realist, but Barad goes on to say that he's an anti-realist, he's not a realist, and that Bohr's realism was really complementarity.
What do you understand by realism?
Sorry?
What do you understand by realism?
Well, that I think it's in relation to representationalism, but I think that Barad is presenting him as an anti-realist because it fits in with her notions of agency and interaction.
Then I have to ask a complementary question. Then what's the notion of agency? What is the agency?
The notion of agency.
No, sorry, I'm not taking it as I'm putting that impression. I'm just trying to get out of what you're saying.
Well, I'll read what she says because she kind of answers that right at the end of the chapter. She said, page 131. She says, finally, it seems important to consider whether it even makes sense to attribute the notion of agency solely to human beings, since this particular conception already seems to be undone by the analysis we've been considering. Indeed, the issue is not merely who or even what gets to have agency, or whether or not culture or nature determines a particular outcome, but also what the notion of interactions tells us about the nature of causality, such that we will be able to account for how the distinctions between nature and culture, human and non-human, and science and society are produced, what that production entails, and how we are to understand the nature of agency.
So what is she saying?
I think it's sort of just to do with her theories of entanglement as well. That and Bohr talks about there being no boundaries, and means that everything is entangled, and so you can't get those binary options all the time. You know, nature versus non-nature, all the things she's talking about, but there aren't really binary concepts. Okay, that's how I read it. I don't know if that's right.
You're actually right. Before getting to decide if it's right or wrong, I was trying to get a, besides pointing out what seems silent in the text. What do you hear? I mean, what's it important reading to you? Are you taking anything home from it? At the moment, you're just sort of trying to understand.
No, I am. I find it, well, especially when he talks about photography and light, and the sort of moment of impact and how that is brought about is very interesting. Yeah, and I like the way she writes about diffraction as well, especially from what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's an interesting step aside. Can you, again, since you are more informed about these things, but can you give us a description of the constant and then the two things, the constant and why there is a difference between measuring the position and measuring the momentum, how that works?
Right.
The constant seems simpler to me, but maybe it's not.
Well, I can do the Planck constant thing, so you can take that. Well, the Planck's constant comes from a problem which classical mechanics can't solve, in that if you have a black body and heat it up, in classical mechanics it should say because black absorbs all colour, it will emit no colour. But what actually happens is that a black body, when heated up, will start to glow red, orange, then white and blue. So it doesn't need a piece of paper.
Any colour?
Any colour. So as the temperature increases, nothing, there's just no colour. But what actually happens is at these ends of the spectrum, there are colours, like in the X-ray, infrared spectrum. This black body sort of gives off colour, and that doesn't work for classical mechanics because black just absorbs everything, nothing comes out. So there must be some sort of way that colour gets out, and the Planck's constant explains that. He links temperature and wavelength, that there are specific wavelengths that when they overlap at certain temperatures, certain things escape. And this is through quantum of action. There's discrete steps which allow certain photons at certain wavelengths to pop out. H, as Planck's constant, is similar to Einstein's C, the universal constant of the speed of light. Planck's constant is another one of those things. It doesn't represent anything. It's just the state of what is. It's something that's necessary in order to make things work. It's a necessary constant which allows things to sort of happen.
Would it be right? I remember reading in that book of Stephen Hawking's The Brief History of Time, a description that to me was very intuitive about this problem of the constant. It wasn't coming from the black body radiation issue, but from the orbit of electrons around the nucleus of an atom. Apparently, according to quantum physics, you do not have any possible orbit with any radius, but there are just fixed distances for the orbit to exist. So an electron can gravitate at, say, 5 units of distance, nanometers, whatever is the size, or 3 that cannot go in between. And when it jumps from one to another, it releases some energy, which that is the photon.
The important thing is that it does jump, it doesn't move.
In continuity, yes.
Yeah,
so that you
discontinuous.
have this grayness of the very texture of matter, below which you cannot measure, and therefore the size of the unit of measure you adopt to measure that becomes relevant, because if it is smaller than that, there are stretches where you measure nothing. So immediately your tool of measurement acquires an importance because it's no longer transparent. The image of matter that was projected by Newtonian physics instead is a continuous one, where approximation from any macroscopic size to an infinitesimally precise point was conceptually possible. Maybe not practically possible, but ideally possible. So one could always have reached the point where whatever the remainder was could be discarded as irrelevant for the measurement, or one could have even ideally reached an absolute measurement. Now, what I understand of this problem of the Planck constant is that this is no longer possible. There are steps. It's almost like a digital 0 or 1.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That's correct. It's similar to the way you think of information being transferred as packets rather than photons being both wavelengths of light and particles of light. It's the same sort of thing. That things jump. It's not a continuous stream of data being transmitted. It's bundles. It's things that are not compressed, but they're together. They travel sort of together in some way.
So to add to this, if the measurement is conceivably absolute, if ideally I can conceive of an absolute measurement, then I can also conceive of an absolute observer that has a perfect image of what is happening and can, again, ideally, calculate what is going to happen all the way into the future and calculate backward what had happened, and therefore, in principle, again, rewind events into the past. These were implications of Newtonian physics that were not immediately postulated, but they did not have a tool for distinguishing past and future, because there will always be an external position that allowed to see everything in one way, the gaze of God that sees the universe from outside. And at the same time, this was possible because the measurement was, again, I insist, ideally infinitesimally precise. While this introduction of these gaps, these dashes, there is something, there's information, there's information, does not allow to go past a certain unit.
I mean, for me, it's like I'm reading it a little bit action-reaction kind of thing. You know, every action has the opposite reaction. Like I'm translating it for myself in a sense that, you know, if you have reaction, you observe the reaction, you can go back to the action because it's the opposite of what took place. Yeah, if you push, falls, stuff like that. So that's Newtonian. So you're exactly right. You know, you have a tape that you can go back to and go in the future with, because then you can predict that if that reaction takes place or if that reaction happened, that if action happens again, you can predict the reaction, which means you know the future. You know, and with the kind of the light emitting from a leap, yeah, between when the particle jumps and shouldn't, because like why does it do it? It just it's here and then it's here. There's no time, there's no space in between. Nothing of that exists. So exactly what you're saying, you know, you can't go back because you have like there's infinite possibilities of where that was, because there is empty spaces. Yeah, there is actual like nothing that you can't get back to, weave through, or figure out through. You cannot predict.
Makes sense.
You cannot predict in a way of behavior. You cannot predict the past.
Like
Well, you cannot observe the past, by which you cannot predict the future as such. So time kind of literally timeline, the measurements, that kind of what is and what isn't, kind of those dualities disappear as such. But yet she kind of at the end, what I'm kind of reading here, what she brings in, finally it's important to consider whether it makes sense to attribute the notions of agency solely to human beings, and you know, she kind of brings it back to the more of the, there is a nature, there is a culture, which is very gender and queer question, always kind of identity question, are we nature, are we culture, you know, we always ask that question, are we both, are we combined, whatever happens. But she brings those binaries in again in relation to interactions, which you know, it basically discusses the fact, and that's why I'm trying to figure out connection, because I don't know, that's why I'm asking also it's a question. But if interaction is what in a way creates a sense of identity of some sort, ontology, and what she calls, I don't remember if she has the whole phrase, something like
Ethical ontology.
yeah, that's the one. Anyway, so she has the whole thing, and interaction creates that, or sets up that as, because of the action or relation that happened, then we can talk about this, and then you have those and then you have kind of like those nodes of what is what. Yeah, she talks like, you know, something is something. So in order for those to occur, something must happen. Something must have agency in order to produce, but that something cannot be without that interaction, in a way, through her way of thinking.
But this brings us to the second problem that
Yeah.
Sophie highlighted and you were asking me to express. But I think it's important to underline once more that the distinction that brings this problem of action into the definition of nature and the problem between the object and the subject is that is the passage from an image of nature and an image of knowledge that is absolutely aware and accepts that the way we measure is finite. Obviously, we are finite. We need tools to read into things with the microscope, whatever else we are using, and our measurement will always be limited because we are not gods. We do not have an infinite amount of power, and therefore we cannot reach an infinite amount of knowledge. But the image of nature and of matter that classical mechanics presented did imply instead that it is possible in principle or in mathematical terms to reach an absolute measurement. So there is this leads to an objectivity, a realism. There is a real reality there which I, human scientist or philosopher, cannot fully reach, but an equally idealized observer, the demon that is often postulated in mechanics by Laplace and then in terms later by Maxwell, could. So somewhere there is an image of the universe that can be seen from outside it. And therefore there is the universe as an object and the gaze looks at it. That's the one, if you remember last year we were reading Deleuze's image of thought, that's precisely the problem that he addresses. The idea that there could be an overall image of the boundary and a definition that is a priori of all other observations. Now,
Independent reality.
an independent reality, yes. Now, and all elements in this dependent reality exists per se before their interactions with other things. What I hear in this problem that Barad presents is that once this continuity toward the infinitesimal point that has no dimensions is interrupted by the quantum discontinuity, these packs of energy, then the measuring tool becomes relevant because it's impossible to idealize. There are sections, as you were saying, that are void, and then the whole idealized image breaks down, and the tool becomes created, makes words. This is why I believe there is the epistemological ontology, all in us. All fronts of the philosophical questions are somewhat at the same time, because one makes words by applying one apparatus to the other.
I'm still thinking about the gas and what they do to the measurement, because I think she wrote about like when the photon is released like from the mechanism that it emits like a certain amount of energy and then hits the plate. I think she says that it's impossible to measure that change of state.
I don't know if I am oversimplifying it, but what I understand is the photon is the smallest unit of light possible. One cannot tune lower than the degree of a photon, a hypothetical machine that measures light, to measure less than that. It would measure nothing. There is nothing to be measured in between photon and photon. So, does that make sense?
That's right, yeah.
So,
Almost right. Did you say?
so
That's just me being wishy-washy.
So the problem is that it's no longer possible to idealize the image of observation and the image of reality. You are bound by the characteristics or the dimensions of your tool of measurement. It does not mean that there is nothing there and we are making it up in a purely solipsistic way.
There's something.
That implies finitude of measurement more than and
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yes. Yes. I would say yes.
Which she says, which I'll have to ask her, and I don't understand this, that when you switch on the light in the room,
Mm-hmm.
in the dark, the furniture is rearranging itself. You don't know that, but that's what it's doing. And that's a concept I just can't get my head around, or I didn't really understand. Can you explain?
Well, it doesn't make much sense on a larger scale, but the principle is essentially the same in a smaller, on a microcosmic scale.
On an atomic scale.
Yeah,
I think.
if there's no light, then the particles existed. Particles, wavelengths. Without the photon to act as some kind of measurement, they do exist in all that, in all those positions at the same time.
The box argument.
But because Planck's constant is a universal, it applies at the large scale and the small scale. It's just at the large scale that room for movement, that room where those possibilities start to exist is like infinitesimally small. But at the smaller scale, there's a larger space where they exist in a stranger sort of way.
And then what this makes me think is that this destroys the image of an absolute reality. There is no absolute matter that exists per se. It's no longer possible to think of it as such. Therefore, we are not going to quantum physics to justify the macroscopic problems. It denotes an impossibility to reach a foundation, to reach a ground. Therefore, it demands of us to think in different terms how we are making sense of our scale. See, there is a difference. It's not that quantum physics gives us a new truth. It denies the image of the truth that existed before turns the problem back onto us here.
I mean, isn't that what they, when she talks about the light experiments, this particle and what is it, the wave, and she actually said, well, it's particle, it's a wave, it's both. So it kind of denies universality of what is light, basically, because sometimes it looks as that, sometimes it may look like that, sometimes it looks like both at the same time.
It's never both. Not in the same time.
Can we behave? Some mathematical equations I was researching that actually allow for light to be both particle and wave.
Yeah.
Is it
But
that is a particle but still create a diffraction pattern over time?
Yeah, but what I understood from the book at least is that either you have the result of one or the other. You don't have the result mixed.
Yeah,
And that, so it's kinda wrong to say this is both, because the whole point is not to detach the phenomenon and the apparatus. So if you say there's both, it seems like you are detaching it from the apparatus. Like it is both.
Yeah.
Actually,
No, I'm saying
being
it
and
can
behavior,
be
though.
both. Like,
Okay.
I'm not saying it's not this, but both. I'm saying it can be
yes. Okay.
quantified as wave, or understood as a wave, and it makes sense. Can be quantified as a particle and makes sense in certain phases. It can be quantified as both wave and particle and makes sense.
But not at the same time.
Yeah, but because there's like the
This,
principle
like
of
different
superposition.
equations, different things,
Yeah.
which basically in some way you can I think of it as kind of removing of the common ground of something being universal, because there is no like the light stops being the or light or anything basically stops being as one, and that's it, because it becomes a
That seems to understand this
multiplicity.
better. Is finding the light as a particle or as a wave, does it depend on the apparatus of measurement? Or the complementarity sits somewhere else?
Yeah, I think in terms of the apparatus you use, it does define how it's received. It's easy to think about photon as a virtual particle. It's not without trying to get into the virtual. It's a virtual particle is something that exists as a particle and wavelength. It's not virtual particle or an actuator. Its virtualness has that indeterminacy about it, which it's real but it's not real. And that helps me think about how you should think about a photon. I think that helps.
Yeah, because these were all thought experiments, weren't they? They didn't actually create these
No, not in the start,
boxes
but then-
with the
yeah, but
slits.
appearance.
They are now
But then you
proper
pointed out
experiments.
the two machines, two apparatuses, the plate, the fixed plate to measure
Yeah.
the position of the photon and the moving plate to measure the momentum. So then you have two apparatus, two machines that are constructed differently. One is this fixed plate that records the hit of the photon. The other one that needs to move to record the impact that the photon has. It records an effect.
Yeah, I was going to bring, but it was a bit heavy, this little dolly I've got where you can put a camera on and move it, because I thought it kind of showed the whole thing really well. I think of it as kind of like a tripod, a fixed tripod, or a movable dolly or something, where the picture can be taken from all different positions.
It's not simply the picture can be taken from different positions.
Well, the light can hit the apparatus, if you like.
What it seems to me, I don't remember what Barad is exactly saying, is that she insists that what happens, I believe it's page 114, that this problem of the two different apparatus that allow to see the position or the momentum have a problem, generate a problem for the independent existence of the object versus the subject, and also make the photon play the role of an object in one and much more active agency in
Agencies
the
are
other.
opposite, yeah.
In page 114, I'll refer you to the second paragraph.
Which page?
114. She's referring to these two thought experiments of fixed and moving plate. It says the first case, the one of the fixed plate, essentially describes the process of taking a picture of a particle with a flash camera. So imagine the thing is flying around. In that case, the light photon is part of the agencies of observation. In the later case, the light photon's momentum, the later case, the light photon's momentum is being measured and hence is part of the object in question. So the question of what constitutes the object of measurement is not fixed. As Bohr says, there is no inherently determinate Cartesian cut between object and subject. The boundary between the object of observation and the agencies of observation is indeterminate in the absence of a specific physical arrangement of the apparatus. What constitutes the object of observation and what constitutes the agencies of observation are determinable only on the condition that the measurement apparatus is specified. The apparatus enacts a cut relating the object from the agencies of observation. Clearly then, as we noted, observation do not refer to the properties of observation-independent objects, since they don't really exist as such, so that's the virtuality we were describing. She then delves much more in detail into things, but what comes out here for the first time is that rather than there being an a priori differentiation or cut, which calls a Cartesian cut between subject and object, it is the choice of apparatus that installs different cut, and if the apparatus different installs a different kind of cut or different kind of organization of nature and distribution of object, observer, data, information, and so forth. So there is a creativity inherent to the definition of what the apparatus and what the reality is. And in a way, it can be simplified as to the size of your measuring tool. So there is a fractal issue there. A couple of weeks ago, we were speaking of the fractal length of the possibility as an example for these kind of you remember this was 2 or 3 years ago, we went over Mandelbrot notion of the problem of the length of the possibility. Where he asks how long is a possibility? Well, it depends on how long is your unit of measure. If you adopt a segment of 1 kilometer, possibility will be 100,000 kilometers, and I'll make it up. But if your unit of measure is 100 meters, you can go around the putman much more precisely, and the length increases. If you reduce the unit of measure, you take only 1 meter long segment, you can go around each rock, but then you can go down to 10 centimeters and really fall. Then you go down to 1 centimeter, and you cannot imagine how it continues. The problem that we find here, so already we have that the unit of measure is determining the size of reality. But what we find here is at some point, rather than finding the ultimate reality, we find a discontinuous one. So there is a constant beyond which precision can no longer continue. And the creativity becomes twice important, the creativity of apparatus. Because you can't go past the limit that nature poses. And you are faced with this uncertainty before the measurement of where your ultimate object will be. I mean, I'm trying to.
Maybe we could think about all these things, trying to translate them into making art.
I was going to say this. I was discussing this with others yesterday. Imagine that you want to make a drawing, the most classical drawing of something that is real, a portrait, and you draw with these. You will have a considerable degree of precision in the rendition of the subject you're drawing. But if you draw with a marker that has a tip of an inch width, your precision cannot be the same. And then if you move from that to change entirely the technique you're using and you decide to record the sounds of your subject, say the person that you want to portray, and you record my voice and the sounds I produce by moving and being here, you already have an entirely different kind of thing. Then you make another step, and if you record my trace online, you change not only the size but even the quality of your definition of what I am, and the image that comes up is completely different, and on you can go. So there is an inherent creativity in the definition of the apparatus and the definition of what you expect reality to be.
Just realized actually what threw me off yesterday when we were starting to talk about the precision, that I think it's not probably should be dropped. It's like actually producing, like a different image picture in the Virgin portrait or whatever, of, which is being generated by the, conceptual / material toolbox, which you choose. I don't think there's like degrees of precision in here,
No, but it's true. It's not a problem. It is not a problem of precision, but it starts from a problem of precision because the previous paradigm, the Newtonian paradigm, worked on the idea of absolute precision. So first you encounter the fact that precision is not just a contingent limit. The impossibility of absolute precision is ontological. It's not just down to us because we are somehow weak. We're not weak observers. We have a shape, and another observer will have another shape or another set of qualities. So instead of having a limited precision, we are actively producing. There is an agency on all the elements that participate into generating the phenomena that comes out of the observation. Does this very silent when you say?
Well, what struck me, and that's it from another direction, I was saying this effect, it struck me that as a book it's very easy to say vanilla. When she draws, when the Egyptologist draws the boundaries of the phenomena, it's like these boundary lines don't really suggest a sort of seismic grinding together. These boundary lines, these lines that are drawn between, let's say discourses or something like that, say between reflection and diffraction, something like this. This kind of line is doesn't come across as a kind of seismic zone of seismic activity, of seismic enforcement, a kind of sexualized, which it should be, a sexualized, aggressive kind of imposition of a narcissistic kind of state upon the world, which is obviously part of the returning to about aggressive vision. This image you talk about, these are aggressive visions. And I don't really think that that kind of understanding comes across in this area. With Deleuze, he leaves in Tulpa, say, Kronos and Zeus and Eros. So these words have that kind of resonance still within them. He uses those words. But that doesn't come across when she's talking about this. It doesn't have that sense of, in the agency and stuff, that there is something of violence that takes place, and it's hugely eroticized language games in process here. Big correction, harder kind of language games what's taking place there. And I don't think
Deleuze, not here.
I mean in language itself, in all language.
Yeah.
I don't think that that comes across. That's what struck me to the critics today. It's sort of just a thought. So you missed all that, which is a shame. It's just up your alley in a way.
What?
I'm saying that in this book,
Yeah.
just coming at it from a different angle, it comes across to me, just what Dave said, it struck me as being a little bit what I call vanilla. That in these boundaries that the agent realist draws in the phenomenon and stuff, there's no sense of a fault line of seismic activity along these boundary lines where two edges are kind of grinding away at each other. The fault lines, the boundaries that are drawn in the phenomenon, which he talks about. This is how you specify within the phenomenon, the boundaries could be apparatus. There's no grinding away there. There's no sense of a kind of violence of an aggression or hugely eroticized language, which takes place, which should be manifested. We're talking about things like reflection and diffraction and the need to destroy the one. You talked about destruction. There's no sense of that comes out of this. Whereas I found in Deleuze's language, he leaves in things like Kronos and Eros and Zeus, these words that are still within there. So, I mean, she has what I talked earlier about, sort of saying there's you need to sort of look at the kind of community you want to belong to and the identification that you make. There's a kind of, someone's point in the day, you want to make a sideways glance at who's paying the piper, who's making the dance, who's calling the tune, things like that. Because within the language, there's always this kind of erotic, sexualized aggression within language. There's a narcissistic something that is at play within it that is missing from quite a lot of discourses, in fact, which just something that struck me in reading this, that there's that no sense in the boundary lines that you draw. And actually, when Sophie was talking, and when she was talking about Bohr and Heisenberg, something of that violence did come up when he was saying, I think it's about 1927, they're not getting along, are they? They're not getting along. One goes on holiday skiing, one goes off somewhere else. And that's where they actually come up with their ideas of complementarity and uncertainty.
That's what Margaret said,
Yeah.
she didn't do it together.
And
you
that,
did it on
yeah,
your own.
but that comes through a breakdown in their relationship. So actually are again talking about this kind of deep violence, this grinding, this language, which
Do you think it's because her audience isn't necessarily clear?
I don't know. I think maybe the stylistics I was talking about. It's not her style.
But if
And
you,
I'm not.
if you think that,
I'm not making a. I'm just making a point that in terms of stylistic, I'm not making judgmental on that. I'm just saying, just think. It just struck me talking to Davis, who was talking about. You were talking today about this kind of, trying to engage with her was causing you kind of. You didn't say hair ripping, but you did say it was a kind of book
Really
throwing.
smashing.
Yeah, a kind of to engage with that, and I think
What's the what's the
probably
crux? You
interesting.
read it and you don't get now understand what you're speaking
Yeah.
actually.
So now
That's
I
at stake
think
here.
it's just something that we should just tuck away in the back of our minds, memories, not forget. That is there, and as you say, but in the 1927 when they go on their respective gather their thoughts. It's at that point that they come up with these two on entry uncertainty. So, you know, I think it's an important issue, point, that what we're talking about here is something, it's not anemic. It's not,
No, that, of
you
course.
know, we're not talking about something, you know, we're talking about bombs,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah.
And lots of people
if you read,
Like if you read her other texts, which
Yeah.
she writes, especially in relation, because she did publish quite a lot in relation to the queer theory, which kind of requires in some way sexual difference,
Yeah.
not requires, but hooked into it, and she does write quite.
Yeah.
Because, for example, she calls the atoms, the quantum conditions, qualities, queerness itself. You know, I do that. You know, the queer, exactly. Yeah, the queer itself, lively mutating organism, and the queer in itself is a lively mutating organism, desiring radical openness, a aging protein, proton. Yeah. Differentiating multiplicity at the gentle this/continuity, and she's very when you hear her speak, for example, she's very peculiar about why there's a slash. There's actual physical slash to the when she creates her own neologism, or she differentiates the language, and she creates the slash, the dot.
You've heard her speak.
Yeah, you can online. Yeah, you can watch her online. Quite funny. But like the second chapter, she has a talk about it on lesbian studies. I think she teaches the second chapter. It's quite interesting. And an unfold relatively materialized, promiscuously inventive spatiotemporality, and that's kind of, she talks about this. She rarely uses this kind of radical language, or like, let's say, social political language. To bring her research into what we kind of deal with in a way, and yet in the shorter, that's why I was saying when we first kind of met, like when you read her shorter texts, so like they seem more gritty, and you kind of get more. I get more engaged with it, definitely, when it comes to stylistics of it. Although she does explain it, there rather than just be poetical.
Do you think it's because she's citing herself as a physicist in this book? That
Well, the book was, I guess it was designed to be read by the broadest audience and the physicists. So that's why I guess talking about Zeus or Kronos would have made them totally flip out and never finish the book.
Yeah.
Incredible.
My issue with that is a similar sort of thing, that she makes the argument about how no individuals don't pre-exist their interaction. Individuals emerge from interactions. That's all she's really got to say about individuals. And Johnny dropped the bomb last week very quietly about where's the sort of the singularity in Barad? Where does it come from? Where's the one-sidedness to it? And I think that does need to be sort of fleshed out more. So that you're not just living in this multi-relational puddle. The cut does enact a very specific. It does allow the individual to develop, to have a position somehow on art or something.
And that's quite hard, isn't it? To take that
Very hard,
position.
If you're not going to completely detach and metaphysically detach something from.
I believe, I agree, for different reasons we don't like the style of this text.
No, I'm not saying that.
I find it extremely boring to read. Descriptive. It's got the worst qualities of the sociological and cultural studies kind of text. There is a lot of adjectives and
It doesn't even describe the science of it, which is.
but I believe that when she speaks of apparatus installing boundaries, then she goes into the question of matter, and she says it is important not only that something matters, but how it matters and for whom it matters. Then, although it is not expressed with a lot of rhetoric quality, then she's going to the point of how the cat generates a singularity, because she is pointing at the emergence and for the installation of a distribution organization mode of circulation, that it does not matter where it comes from, but one that engages with it and takes responsibility for it on the basis of the consequences it will have. So then, you look at the total model. I do this, that will happen. When most of us probably were at the lecture of Stangers in Nottingham 2 years ago. And one thing that I always rather have never heard them speaking, but often if you hear somebody speaking, what they write becomes much more clear immediately, because they give the right emphasis to the points they want to. And at some point she said, models, she was speaking about models, which could be an apparatus or something, whatever one starts from, but is good for asking questions and refuting objections. It's not the representation of an objective reality. Now, here is the same kind of thing. That if I can ask questions on this in a certain direction and refute the objection I receive, so it creates, to use a word that is very delicate, an ephemeral and temporary ground of which I can use as a vehicle for a ride until it will hold me, and then I will have to jump out to the next, so hope creative and so on. But it becomes a matter of decisions I take and the responsibility attached to those decisions. This is why I find that it is interesting to me in relation to art, because then all the choices or all the decisions of the work that I make as an artist generate possibilities which imply sense and value in different ways, and then I explore them, but I am somehow making worlds, not world, W-O-R-L-D, rather than being engaged with representing either what's outside or what's inside my mind. But I agree that it's sort of diluted.
Like for me, the question of consistency, I mean, well, yesterday, like a little bit, because it's just, what does it mean if apparatus is functioning properly or not, as, when Barad says, and she explained that, why, the production, say, of other particles or waves, there's a degree of consistency, which means that, apparatus works, and I wonder, like, if this sort of a logic, could be taken, to the art world, because, the way you're speaking, basically it gives you like an ultimate amount of possibilities, for developing apparatuses and for developing worlds. So the wonder, like a degree of consistency needs to appear somewhere in that process also.
Yes, but the consistency is confirmed by the future developments, not by the roots of the phenomenon into a chronological past or an a priori logical past. I'm always quoting David because it's very clear when it comes to scientific concepts. 2 weeks ago, he was saying that what's important in an experiment, what the experiment does, if it functions, is that it permits repeating itself, so that one consistently gets the same results, and therefore there is a form of truth that is stated within the dimension of that experiment. Subjectively generated, but inside the experiment, is what Stangers calls the truth of the relative, which she opposes to the relativity of truth. Now, at that point, if you think again of the question of something matters, and important also how it matters and for whom it matters, you turn the phenomenon we have just generated by setting up an apparatus to measure this uncertainty horizon. This gives you some information, which is some sort of pattern. And then you orient in what can this do? What does it do for me? What does it do for all of us? What are the consequences? What are the risks? What are the possibilities? How does it resonate? If it repeats, firstly it repeats or not. And if it repeats, where does it go? What kind of pattern it installs? Because it might be a one-off, and then it fades away again. Then you don't have any sort of objective information available, or tangible, consistent information available.
This is like I was saying today, Tate, it's about trying to understand this text. You kind of have to believe in it and then think what would be the consequences. And it's kind of like that repetition of this. If a thing repeats, you have to kind of sort of think, well, where's this going? How do I believe in this? This is going to be the outcome, the consequences. And then in the text you can decide whether to believe it or not. So the outcome is at first something that you kind of have to sort of master. But you're not the master, but you try and have to master in the process of, it's like from the future as you're heading towards it, as it comes towards you, say the future comes towards you, you have to master the art in the process itself. You're not already the artist, you're not already the art, you're in the process itself. So it's on the spot. And if it repeats, but then you have this kind of compensation bias where you can always believe that you're mastering the art and you're self-affirming your own position within that framework, that apparatus where you're drawing the lines. So I think in the multiplicity of voices that are in that compensation, that tell you, there's always room to develop. And this is back to that my idea about the aggression. There's always ways to develop other subsequent boundaries or lines within the orientation that will give a different what I call a timbre, a twist, a tone to the way that the position is ultimately going to go. It will go with where the lines are drawn. It's like when Dane talks about Leibniz wave, and you hear the crashing of the wave, but not the individual, each individual. But it's in those small print convictions, in the absolute smallness of the diffraction in, say, a sound wave or something like that, that gives something a timbre. But it's always where you don't have to draw these other lines, less. In Nietzsche, you would talk about it being which force decides, which force, which typography you want to go with. But it's never a question of power or dominant force. It's always a question of the actual overall picture, which is made up by these subsequent small print convictions, I'm saying, that the influence to attend this in the relation, which is the diffraction pattern. It is the diffraction pattern. So this is how I sort of understand kind of the violence of the apparatus when you make it a stand in a position. You do so sort of from a weak position. It's not a strong position that holds out. Any of these people start from a position where they are not. Now everyone's bored to write books about them, but that's not their initial starting point. They're at the bottom, and then they have to build up and fight their path and become where they stand now. But it's not as though there's an instantaneous arc. But even now, the Copenhagen theory is still just one theory. There are others who are still outside the Copenhagen who do believe that like modularity, there is alive and dead at the same time.
To continue to this. To add another comment to this change, very much agree with, and to answer the question of first. If you think of artistic practice as a practice that has got something to say, but that something to say happens and it is possible because the artist also makes, bad metaphor, the language with which this is said at the same time. So then you have, because you create the rules according to which your work must be engaged with. Then this might not be picked up. So this, again, bad metaphor, this language you have invented, the body is prepared to learn it, and you remain alone in your studio, or alone as a scientist. Or more people are interested in learning it, and they speak it, and they understand what you're saying, and what you're saying circulates, and then it's not much you become successful, but what you have done spreads, it circulates, and it becomes part of what heart is. So it repeats its own parameter, actually. And if you remember when we were reading the laws again last year or 2 years ago, in the second chapter of difference and repetition for itself, the law speaks of the synthesis of time, of the past and the future, of the present. It is accumulation of, we get it from the term, accumulation, especially for the past, accumulation of memory, which continuously adds to itself, creating this virtual past, because virtual in the sense it is never already there, and is continually redefined by what we add to it, so it is very fluid in its definition, in its description. And so is the future with the expectations and projections. And you continuously from the present, like a fountain, spread out to projections. And it's the repetition that is accumulated that creates these images, which traditional mythology would have posed as separate and existing.
Yeah, but isn't that what she calls mattering?
Yes, I think so at least.
The kind of that invites the other in the say that it gives a responsibility to you. She calls it responsibility at one point, different things, but yeah, that invites the other, which means expands and repeats in a way what you call repetition here. You know, it is able to some mattering in order for some. Because she never calls it matter, she calls it mattering, which is already in the flux and the movement to kind of, I think she uses that to very much pinpoint the action part of her work. Yeah, that is never stable enough. It always needs that repetition in order for it to matter, mattering, become a mattering.
But what she says is that mattering, she says, to enact what matters and what is excluded from mattering, apparatus enacts a gentle cut that produce and determine boundaries and properties of entities. So we're back to my, well, not really back to mine, but I'm going to repeat this because that's the kind of process that I'm thinking of. That boundary, this is a fault line. Those cuts, to enact those cuts, are seismic in their scale.
Don't you say they are seismic in the sense that they...
That's an image, yeah.
No, but in the sense that they separate what exists. Because what I hear in the cut is that actually they cut into what could be the Deleuzian pure difference at the horizon. They cut into it by organizing it one way or another.
No, I think they're fault lines. I think they're like they're boundaries, and at the social level, intensities that you take, those are gentle cuts. The image that you project, the stylistic existence I called about. Within that, we have the very much the sexuality, the psyche. Well, it's not nurture nature; it's nurture nature psyche. It's always psyche, and it's always a sexuality which isn't sex, and it is an aggressiveness in that of a gentle agency of Nietzschean style of forces that happen within the instant, within the depth of a Deleuzian kind of chronos of states, affairs of bodies, that kind of thing. That is the realism, bottom matter of apparatus, if you like. There are bodies within, when she talks about it, and so you point out in the photocopied text, the other essays and text, she gets much more into that nitty gritty, that kind of dirty. When you talk about fetus,
Johnny's
like
radical
this.
kind of. Yeah.
So it's not, it's not safe. That's what I mean by seismic. These are geological
intensity.
lines.
By seismic,
When we're talking about nature, we're talking about nature which is like big nature, dangerous nature. Dangerous natures.
I don't think it is intensity as simple as that. Is that I like what you're saying, because I was thinking of the apparatus as something that actually gathers, and instead you're pointing out how it installs tensions, because it installs distributions where what we've learned to think of as pre-existing poles and instead generated and distanced and put it in. Yeah, I think that's quite a nice.
And with Sophie's story about the iceberg war 1927, that not getting on, going apart from each other, how holiday, and then they come up with their ideas of vegetarian uncertainty. It's sort of in that process, it's part of that process of not getting coming apart and then coming back to go, hey, I've got an idea, hey, I've got an idea, and going another, it's
I was thinking, Stuart earlier brought on Stange's notion of reciprocal, which is a name that points, or a concept that points in the direction of the work of the apparatus here. Stange speaks of his reciprocal capture as something that involves obviously the scientific model, but also the willingness of at least part of the scientific community and the political community and the society to accept that proposal. She works around the work of specific physicists who developed an alternative to the classic reading of physics in Newtonian time, but also the classic reading of quantum physics, because to him, in both instances, there was no way to distinguish past and future, and he proposes an interpretation which in technical terms I can't describe, but where time is as an arrow, it goes from past to future, you can't rewind. There is he adds another constant which for him is entropy. And this is based on the fact that different mathematical models have different syntaxes which act as apparatuses organizing the work in a way or another. But she insists that presupposes the willingness of the physicists to accept this proposal and see where it can take them. So in this sense, I was thinking of bringing together a gathering, but I like the tension that you see here quite a bit.
This is Prugy who worked with Stan.
Yes, she was her student, she did PhD with him, and then she went on becoming a collaborator for the philosophical side of his work. Does it resonate with your understanding? Does it?
I haven't. No, I've ordered it. So dipped into it.
I want to try defend Barad's way of writing. In the book,
told like 2 or 10 different Barad's way of writing. Wasn't that like a kind of like a lawyer's speech? I love that. That was beautiful. Hello. Oh. We should do it more often. Like we should perform that more often. Like actual moments. Jakub and I would like go back to the blues for 5 minutes, please.
So you go back to the room for 5
The
minutes.
blues. Yeah, I want to go back home. Mothership, take me home. I'm sorry. Just reminded me of some like when you speak microphone, then you start speaking for. Oh no, no. You hide behind that podium. So the way I can console my brain from exploding. Go on.
okay, so my trajectory of defense for the what's the term in English for the accused?
Accusation?
Like,
Accusation.
the accused one.
Yeah,
The defendant.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm not trying to say this in legal terms because I don't know them. Anyway, I think that if we agree that there's no objectivity, and so what you might have is accountability, then how can you make sure that academia and that kind of research and artistic research don't just collapse into one thing? They can, if you think that it's fine, but I still think that it is useful to draw a distinction, and I think that distinction could be an idea of clarity in the sense that in order to allow broader diffraction, in order to allow specialists from different branches of knowledge to have the possibility to understand a bit of each other and to diffract their research from more distant points, you kind of need to write it in a way that might sound lame to the people that know exactly what you're talking about, but he has like the political, moral, and epistemological and whatever goal to be reachable for those specialists, those brilliant minds, they are just researching in other directions, so that points that are extremely far away can really find themselves extremely connectable. So that 2 years ago I started this PhD on issues that were very much about painting, and then to find myself be generally interested in thoughts that come out from quantum physics is the last thing I would ever imagine. And so that's why I think it's good that she wrote this book in this fashion, because because allowed this massive diffraction to happen, and I think that this is actually what researchers in academia should do in order to make sure that there are no fringes of academia that start really not thinking that really start thinking that other fringes are not reliable. You need to have a sense of mutual accountability, reliability, which is respect in a way. Otherwise there's an atomization, and then so it's fine that you like to write in a wonderful, sexy way. You can do it. I just think that you should be like S. Blanchot and find your way to fund your writing outside of academia and get it published, because you're really good, as any other artist will do.
I agree, everything, but I think what I was saying was that what I say when you read this, it says it's familiar, but it's not. That's what I'm saying. That this is a highly eroticized text. It just doesn't appear to be, but it really is. That's what I was saying. It's not. I agree with you, and I also agree. But you do need that when you say clarity in the institutions and the solidarity, and everyone walks together forward. Paleontology or biology or whatever it is, it's physics. There's not one stepping forward. They all come forward in this sort of thing. I agree. But threatening, and this is my readings of Freud, threatening this is this oceanic aggression, which I struggled. He suddenly found that this aggression was almost consuming, and he was like desperately started coming up with the Thanatos and Eros and Thanatos and these kind of ideas, which give clarity all the time. And I think we should be aware of it. There is always the possibility of these fault lines where the aggression, comes through. But I'm not disagreeing with that. I think what you're saying is great, but only with the awareness that there's underlying always a tension that comes through. You need awareness of the tension. It's not. So, but I think it's a highly eroticized text, but it just doesn't. It doesn't read like that, but it really is. It really is.
I think.
I'm not saying there's sexy writing, but it's just that the clues sometimes, with the are much more obvious, when he talks about Thanatos or that kind of stuff, because it's already resonates within those names and stuff. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not. So how would I say this?
I mean,
my
I was.
The defence is, my defence of the defence is, I agree.
I just think that, and I kind of feel this because I'm now asked to write, but one thing which is the great thing is to do research, and in research there's no distinction between doing research for academia or for art. Like, research is never for academia or art. Research is for research.
Mm-hmm.
It's just if you then want to have an outcome that works within this context or that context, then you need to follow the rules of that. And unfortunately, I think you just need to start doing a project when you need to publish something that is for academia. I think you need to kill for the moment the research and try to make a project. Of course, you will find out things while writing, but if the it's schizophrenic. So I'm not saying that it's pleasurable. Probably the great things you discover while writing, maybe you just put it put it back to where you're gonna find them again. But I know it's not nice. It's not something I'm looking forward. But I think I write the best academic texts when I don't set the goal of writing them for understanding or for myself, because that way I just think and I just create stuff that interests me. I think I tend to write the best few pages when I start off thinking I need to explain this to someone I don't know and someone who doesn't understand the majority of this thing, and that way I discover, I put together ideas in a way that it's really personal. It's really not personal. It's valuable in the sense that it's really not Barad, it's really not the things I read, it's really one way to put them together, and I think that kind of simplified version, which doesn't allow the tension, the underground tension to lurk much, which is also because it's not really alive, is what we need to produce in order to...
Don't you think, Alberto, that by... I don't understand the problem you're facing, but by assuming that you can find a clear language, you're actually projecting an image of neutrality, which is actually an image of Alberto.
Definitely, yeah. I'm not saying that I can be neutral, and I can't say that I can have a neutral result. I think it's just a tension towards taking the most responsibility to really say what is really the most important thing. So to be even more myself by trying to simplify things. I have also less room to hide which are my axis in a way. So then you read my 5 pages paper in which I try to be simple, and maybe you can just bash it because you can just find out this massive flaw at the very root. But that is what academia should be about, accountability.
Your diffraction model, it doesn't this sort of kind of go a little bit grind away what you're saying?
Because I think diffraction
it would be problematic if
diffraction
when you're talking to this
diffraction is about research, and it's about
when
art.
you're talking to the idealized person, the simplicity of who doesn't understand. When you're introducing them to this new model, I mean, the problems of introducing anything new to anyone, when you're saying, it's not easy, is it? It's not, and they may not be open, conducive to being told, reflection is out, diffraction is in. They may not be happy with that picture, and then you would have to say, well, look, this is why, and they would then have to engage with it, and that's not that's human to human comes to life.
Yeah, it's a masochist process because but
right in the PhD cert.
Yeah, but to reply to that, yes, the diffraction is about research. Is about this thing that is alive. What I was trying to say from the beginning is, if we want to keep some distinction between art and academia, the distinction I'm seeing at the moment is it's not really that you can be neutral. You cannot be objective. That's the reason why I was starting to saying, how do we define a distinction? And I would say art is not accountable in the sense that I might have my reasons to do this artwork, but this artwork, if it is an artwork, it has to stand on itself and on its own. And if I try to be accountable for it, I'm just damaging it. I'm just not allowing it to be an artwork, or not allowing what I'm setting in front to be encountered and artworks to happen. Whereas I think if I try to kill the research bit and try to, yes, of course, project, reflect an image of what I think is the most important things about the research. It's not going to be fun, but I think I expose which are the important bits, which I think are the important bits in the most clear way, and so you don't need to spend time that you don't have energy, you don't have to make a critique that hopefully I'm gonna receive, and maybe this is gonna be for the
I believe what
better.
you're saying sort of moved from one thing is you're now holding a bit of a different position. But before we go on with this, Ivan, what you're hearing with this tension that has been brought up by Mark and the fracture and the tension between an artistic and an academic way of speaking, in relation to what you were describing earlier, I thought the aesthetic, the negative aesthetic, the terrorism.
Yeah, and one of the phrases I didn't use earlier, because what I'm trying to do is keep my title within certain words, but that there are underlying nuances. There are things such as creative imperative. What is driving an artist to create, and is there an imperative there? And some of the ideas I've been juggling, listening to I've obviously read some of the things there. I don't think it's so revelationary to me, some of the things that she's saying. I did physics many years ago and sort of thought, not perhaps quite in her wording, that this view of the world where everything is interconnected and so on was sort of what I perceived at that time as a kind of the way the world functioned. But when you're actually trying to create art, because I consider myself primarily to be an artist these days, I think the question that's just been raised is how does this impact on art, this kind of philosophy, go right to the centrality of things. Although for me, you're then starting to move into things such as motive. Now, is the motive a conscious motive, such as what just was suggested? If I'm writing something down, am I writing it for me or writing it for an audience to explain to? That's one kind of motive. But another kind of motive, which is what I'm exploring in relation to the research I'm doing, is where your motive comes through from a kind of conditioning. In other words, then you become the agent because of the circumstances you've been exposed to. Now that's different from your own conscious perception of things, because you're then reacting to what has happened, which is where my interest in research comes in. How artists on the ground are responding to terror, and to move another term, the negative sublime, where their senses are overwhelmed by the extreme violence that they're being exposed to, not the beauty of the thing, but the extreme violence, and then how they react to that, and then afterwards, when they step back and they've got their own view of what they've seen, but also they've got the view which is then being reinforced of a spectator participation in those acts from the globalised media globalised media's presentation of those facts, which they then see, which may differ from what they thought they perceived on the ground at the time, and that juxtaposition between the two, and then linking it into what the discussions here are about proximity, and whether there's cuts, and whether there's a kind of, to use some of the language you were starting to explore, like there's a kind of plate tectonics friction going on there.
Yeah.
And it's moving back and forth, but there's then a friction, and it's a little too, I think to use your expression, vanilla.
Yeah, there's an image that Dane couldn't explain best for me in Hofstadter's book, the girdle, you know, with the photograph. Could you explain that to us?
I can't remember.
Well, there's like it's like,
Oh yeah, hang on. Sorry about
yeah.
So he's got the photograph
This is very what you just kind of I think resonates with what you were
where
saying.
Achilles and the tortoise are
Yeah.
playing different records on the photographs, and there's a record that they play which will play the exact correct sequence to dismantle the photograph. And they say, well, can we produce a photograph which will not fall apart to the when it's playing the instruction to dismantle the photograph? And they get a different record to do that, but there's always another photograph that they can produce which dismantles it.
So it's like a feedback loop. So this seismic effect, where the photograph is playing the record, and the vibrations, it's not only the sound, but the vibrations of the record sound come back round and disrupt. It becomes the unplayable, doesn't it? It's like this idea of a feedback loop. and this is kind of what I was hearing, and I like this image anyway, in what you were saying about the artist within those situations, that, you know, actual, and also this, because this resonates with one of those ideas of the body, you know, when she's talking, it is very much about bodies in a landscape, you know, and we are very much, and I think, you know, we don't really talk about the difficulties that you have in these battles and stuff. It does come across. So I like that image. I like what you're saying about the way that the artist is in those situations. It's how he creates this kind of the struggle that you have, you know, again, in those very hard, difficult situations that happen in one's life. This kind of thing.
I am thinking, especially regarding this problem of the language that is used, which I think is quite important, because I had this same problem. I suffered a lot in the beginning of writing the thesis because I thought I had to be descriptive. And the more I allowed myself to write and then add the information in footnotes, the easier and the more fun it became. Fun probably is a big word, but the more satisfactory it became. And I'm thinking of two expressions that Stangers uses in two different shorter texts. One is titled The Cosmopolitical Proposal. It's some 10 pages published in a big collection by Latour, where she insists that the question of mattering that is presented here, she calls it thinking in the presence of the victims. Obviously there is, the cosmopolitical, immediately that's the emphasis of the scientific choices, but she's really emphasizing where is this getting us if we make these choices, what kind of fracture does it install. And at the same time, instead of speaking in another text that is published in the speculative term, she reacts to the notion of the common, especially she's speaking versus an Adrian Hart about the empire. She's introducing a concept of diplomacy where all these heterogeneous practices have to come to what she calls, using Latour expression, parliament. Obviously, to go to a parliament already, you have to be willing to accept the other position rather than go and kill everybody. But there is this idea that you have to have a good disposition to enter parliament. That she doesn't address that. Because you can be at a stage where you cannot enter peace talks. But she doesn't aim at one homogeneous piece. She wants this, what she calls a parliament of heterogeneous practices, or an ecology of practices, which do not give away, do not abandon their peculiarities and specificity, the fact that they're heterogeneous and incommensurate with each other, but accept to not be absolute, each of them. So they accept that the other one can be another truth of the relative, and the other truth of the another truth of the relative, and then we can see how we can coexist. So everybody is contemporary, the observer and the victim of the game. And it is quite interesting because language does set up these fractures and these distributions, and the way one chooses to use it is creative and problematic.
So they say discursive practice are not just language, are they?
Yes.
That's what she said.
Yeah.
It's not just the language itself. There's a material element.
It's Barad, I quite like that of it because to me it is very important for understanding what is material in contemporary art. She wants to
and an immaterial element.
Yeah, but because what I'm aiming at is that there are things that are not tangible, that can be the matter of art, and the material of the art is more sweet. But what matters in this choice of material? So, and the fact that Barad insists several moments in the book not to differentiate between discursive and material practice, but to show that the discursive in itself is a practice, it is material, and vice versa, that the practice sets up its own discourse, is, or better, they are a continuity. It's quite important for it because that's how it goes back to it shows the apparatus as it is described here in this third chapter in a much more conceptual way where its creative logic comes to the fore. So then it goes to the point you were making that this is an highly sexual text.
Yeah, well, all texts are.
Yeah, all texts are, but the
Of course it's highly charged. Talking about really big questions, the big questions. But to me, I mean, to just take it down a step maybe, as I say, I've been looking at my students are doing religious practices for design and stuff. And what he's looking at here is maybe starting from Hegel's sort of centrist representing idea, but the idea is not mental entities. But the thing is, what I'm doing and looking at it is the difference, traditional classical philosophical difference between techno art and craft and stuff, and production, which is the poesis, set over against the praxis, which are these things that are good in themselves, benevolence, generosity, and other things, but there's a slippage between the two. So how do you manifest these ideas? Because you're saying in this government, this parliament, generosity, magnanimous, how to allow the other speak and stuff. So there's always a feedback between these two relationships, but there's no art involved. I mean, or the art is in the process itself. There's no one tells you in a mentoring relationship, you're in like that you're given a responsibility to come to face-to-face, to create face-to-face encounters, but they don't tell you what to do within that encounter. So there's no actual skill or art. There's no techno. There's no skill. There's no poesis as such. That it comes round to this generosity or this benevolence or the magnanimity. Can I say that correctly? Of what you're going to allow the other to say, I give you this time to speak. I'm going to give you this time to speak, but I'm not going to jump in on you. I let you to have your whole speech without jumping. That's magnanimous. I think what I mean. So, but that in itself is not something that's produced materially. That's an immaterial relation, a habit you have with yourself. There's always this leakage, this slippage between praxis and the poesis. These two different kinds of action. One has a material element to it, this body, delures or whatever. And the other has this kind of aeon, this immaterial, corporeal element in itself, which is the magnanimity and stuff, which is allowing the other to speak, that kind of thing. But again, to go back to the interrelationship, there's no actual art or craft or skill. The skill itself is in the instant, it's in the process itself, in the encounter itself, in the actual drawing of the lines, the apparatus in the boundary and stuff. Where of course there is, as I say, that is the sexualization. It's not nurture nature, it's the psyche that's involved there, all three. It's neither one or the other. When you give those essays to first year, is it nurture or is it nature? No, it's psyche, it's sexuality, which is a kind of stance, a timbre, my stylistics of being, an aestheticization of life, that kind of thing, which is kind of notoriously slippery, and don't go to the kind of community you want to belong to, the kind of identities and stuff, which it goes to your idea of solidarity, where everyone is a kind of, steps forward. But there's still always a zigzag line, it's still a jockeying for position, which is when the Barad, within what you were saying about the gender relations and stuff, which is where the lines, the line won't stay, the line's waving, it's not linear, not like that. So, I can perfectly see myself incorporating Barad's language into my own. So when I talk about discursive practices that discursive matrices that create us as soul body production, that is Foucault. And she critiques Foucault, doesn't she? She says his language is outdone. So I can perfectly see me talking, replacing that segment of my introduction or whatever it is, because it's what I identify with, or what I give you, my generosity, with language of Barad, of the apparatus and the phenomena and the lines that we draw. Because, notice one of those lines when I introduce myself is perfect, pure Heideggerian, the environs where I practice my circumspect, concern, and solicitude, forbearance, and consideration. It's pure Heideggerian. If you're a Heideggerian, you know what that concern means. It doesn't just mean concern in that sense. It's a concern with the ready to hand. It's that's concerned with the ready to hand within a Heideggerian situation. The solicitude, that's got nothing to do with the ready hand. So in that sense, it's there. If you're a Heideggerian, you already know there's a multiplicity of voices in that line that I say. If you're not a Heideggerian, you would take it straightforward out of the environment of the circumspect concern, not realising that the concern already leads into a whole world of being with others, being against, or being sort of against the average everydayness of idle chatter and stuff. But it's not like that. So I can quite well agree that Barad's language can be used, a Wittgensteinian kind of language is how you use it, kind of understanding. And I can agree about reflection, except of course reflection does seem to me that if you're taking a diffraction pattern and saying to people, take on my diffraction pattern, that is a kind of also a reflection. I want you to reflect, and that's what I also kind of mean by the sexualization of language. It's kind of narcissistic ego or encounter, agency, which kind of says over against the world, you know, that I want you to kind of use my language. Can you stop using reflection? You know.
No, that's fine. I mean, if this is taken flatly as a new analytical category to be applied as a new totalizer,
I don't think
work.
I don't think that kind of works. The new language games doesn't, you know, the same old. It's still the same old.
Yes, that's true. That's fine.
Also quite not sure about talking to the non-human. As I said at one point, you know, you can talk about your contribution to a community, or in the introduction, you can talk about your contribution to a community, or you can talk about your relations to the non-human. And I'm not quite sure that about talking about the non-human, whether it's God or science, is, you know, how it lends itself to that sense of solidarity. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
No, but I agree with it. I once tried to write an article which is never published, precisely about this importance of how matter matters that Barad raises, which to me was very delicate, because the way it is developed, very often it's nothing but reducing things again to subject and object, but swinging all the emphasis onto the object from the subject. So going from the discursive to some sort of the stone as a will and an agency of its own, and I deal with that. I heard a lot of presentation when I went to the conference in Leeds about, you know, along this line, which were distortions in the things. But sorry, I lost what I was going to say. Yes, that vice versa, one can read this question of how matter matters as a very aesthetic disposition, where I have to listen to the logic of things rather than to the information passed by that logic. So then again, it is my responsibility, it is my agency at play here. But I lost where I was coming from, so I can conclude.
I don't know if I misunderstood what you were saying, but maybe to try to defend what I wanted to say before was, I think diffraction works well in all those contexts in which you don't differentiate form and matter, like in those practices in which you don't differentiate form and matter. And I think that research is that, because you cannot really strip away the language from the content in research when it is alive. It's when you start thinking, oh, what I can do with this? How do I publish this? How can I use this as a tool in an economy that becomes project, and that is really reflection.
Okay.
So in that sense, diffraction is not useful. Reflection is useful, precisely because reflection builds on classical identity, and diffraction would actually has the chance not to build onto any identity, not even delusional identity, if we follow this line that goes between Barad and complex theory. And so I think the tricky bit is to keep this thing clear. And when I talk about these things, of course I am reflecting, because I am trying to make sense to a specific audience. I'm delivering. I'm trying to deliver. I don't think I'm doing research in the same way that I do when I'm not aiming to a specific goal. I think aiming to a specific goal is like having this apparatus or another apparatus changes the result, and research is research when it doesn't have a goal. Like when it's this thing that is alive, but is not projected towards a goal.
That's that slippage. Einstein's talking about between material goals and and the practice of the generosity. But there's always a slippage because you have, as you said, you go from one to the other. You go from the diffraction to the reflection. So there's a slippage, and it's in there, that messy bit. It's quite interesting. And that's where I'm maybe talking about the seismic grind. Whatever. That's just language. It's just poetry. Nietzsche, somebody, probably says it better than what's happening in Barad, in a different kind of metaphor, particle or mission or some kind of energy or forces or something that just appear. I don't know. But that's that area there. The nothing, maybe. Call it the nothing. Yeah, the nothing. Where you have sort of video that talks about what counts for one comes out of inconsistent multiplicity, which you only know after the event. It's like a coming out of the void or something. It's where Schopenhauer's absolute pessimism exists in the nothingness or something like this. It's against the positive of Nietzsche, but it comes out of this.
Just that nothing sounds very negative, whereas
I know, but
the no thing, meaning that
it's kind of like it's like say in Badura or something like this philosophy, what counts one in the situation comes out of a process which you don't know. It's the nothing. It's called the nothing, the void. And there's a process, and it's always after that you can project, or you think back. You presume that it's come from somewhere, something, but it's where it's come from is the inconsistent or the void or the nothing, and it's process. So it's like a maybe it's like when I said earlier the central representation of the idea, where an idea in Hegel is not an entity, it's something like unity in process, and it's that would be the drop, but it's kind of, if you take the Schopenhauer, it's an empty, it's maybe like the black precursor in Deleuze. It's that empty space.
But isn't this the mattering?
Yeah,
it's just that I think you're talking in negative terms of the mattering.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Barrad's mattering.
Yeah. It's just that I'm more comfortable with the mattering, because to say the nothing is it sounds prescriptive, like okay, this is a nothing. Whereas mattering, I think it sounds way more familiar to the kind of known experience we're talking about, because I understand that, of course, you create a narration anytime you look back at what happened.
I like the way you can go in through Schopenhauer, and he calls it the will, actually, not nothing. He calls it will, and this relates it to will in Nietzsche, and then obviously to Deleuze. But I like the way you can go through that into, say, and learn from sort of other cultures, their philosophies, the great Hindus and Buddhist philosophies and stuff. Of course, there's millions of people who engage with that kind of philosophical understanding, not Western tradition philosophy understanding. Again, the two cultures have this they grind against each other because they have different understandings. And who are we to impose our Western values?
No, that's absolutely fine. But I don't hear that diffraction acts upon nothing as in an ontological nothing, and not in a pure difference of the horizon. To me, diffraction is a finitude upon finitude, and that's one of the major differences that one can find in this line of thinking versus a more classic ontological structure that would maybe find different names, but always has an ultimate and a contingent present. Here is one moves from contingency to contingency to contingency. You diffract by interacting with whatever you have. You add another layer or another whatever, and see that you've got consequences, you've got effects, which you take into account and which might repeat, might take you somewhere else, might destroy you, might enrich you, and then you continue these actions of interference and living at experiences and suffering and accepting the effects. A way for me to describe this in simple terms is that what the problem encountered here is that the world is not as it seems, it's not as it appears, but it is also in no other way. So there isn't a situation in which there is an existence without determination, which could be nothingness. In the fault that has two or more sides grounding against each other, nothing comes across in terms of the being becoming nothing, nothing becoming being of Hegel, which I never plays, which becomes the resident difference. It is not here to me, and this is what I find. I don't know if it is heard differently.
Can you repeat that sentence? Sorry.
That the world is not as it is.
Yeah. And then there was
I summarize this in
Yeah.
one, but it's not even a simplistic image, it's just sort of an image. The world is not as it is, but is also in no other way.
It's not in another way.
It's not, yeah, so
Yeah.
the world is not as it appears, so not as it is. The world is not as it appears to us, but it is also in no other way. So one has, as Barad says, only the phenomenon has a basic ontological unit. The phenomenon is contingent, but there isn't an absolute beyond that contingency. If you like, there is a reference to the distinction that Kant makes between the noumenon and the phenomenon. The noumenon is forever on the other side of what the forms of intuition and the category of intellect and the idea of it is organized. But it's transcendental. That the unity of the three ideas is conceivable transcendental. What happens here is a bit more, is pushed more, and I don't want to say more radical, it's pushed further. And she's saying by basic ontological unit is not even the transcendental unit I can think of or I can use for structure my thoughts. My basic ontological unit is this combination that the apparatus has generated, and I am part of the apparatus as much as that ontological horizon that is yet to be structured. And the other people accepting what the result is, and the scientific community that challenges it are all part of the apparatus. The apparatus is in tension, so in this sense there is tension there.
But that all happens because of the apparatus, like they're mattering because of that.
But this does not allow, it does not mean, in my understanding, in this case, and I have to really deeper it, that in this tension that generates, there would be a seepage of some sort of pure ontology, most of dripping in, sipping in, dripping out, whatever, coming through. There isn't. This is why I say that the world is not as it appears, but is also in no other way. Now, this is on the edge of the Leuzian virtual difference, because Deleuze would actually say, yes, but the world is in no other way is precisely that nothingness, which is being, because being deprived of all attributes, it is nothing. But nothing is precisely that which has no attribute of its being. It is, you enter the Hegelian game. And I don't think this is here. I don't find it here. So the diffraction, this is why last week I was speaking of diffraction as this turning ontology forward. You have what has happened, and you see what happens from here onward. It's not only that you don't reach totalization. These problems that quantum physics and other scientific issues bring up is that there is an impossibility of reaching the ultimate, of thinking the ultimate in any form. So the only thing you're left with is a local finitude, heterogeneous with other local finitudes. And then we can enter the discussion we were having. Do we want to impose one as the absolute one, or we want to let them dialogue? Do we want to have a ruling one that tolerates the other, to use a strange expression, or do we want to have a parliament where are all equally important and they exchange rather than trying to find a common ground, which is now impossible? But the ultimate, as I like to call it, whether it is ground or transcendental horizon, is no longer in this game.
No. Yeah, that's the same sense I'm getting. There's just no umbrella. Yeah, there's no umbrella. There's
Yeah.
And like it kind of becomes.
And there's no umbrella because there's no point in having an umbrella, because the umbrella it makes sense in order to put things together. But if you start from the relations instead of the things, it's just nonsense to ask yourself how to put together relations which are already that. totally sure how you say what the ontology forward of diffraction, because diffraction is mattering. When you say ontology forward, maybe it sounds like very just very tricky to talk about
Well,
ontology
something
forward.
exists. No, we're not all of us dreaming of this seminar independently in a solipsistic way. So you can ask the logic of sense. What's the logic of sense? How, or as John likes to say, how are things staying together? How do they stick? And so forth. But rather than seeking an answer or path for exploring this question backward, either chronologically backward or logically backward, to some form of a priori, whether it is solid a priori, transcendental, transcendent, sorry, or it is transcendental, it is virtual, or any other variations of this kind of thing, to which I assimilate the losing difference. You just takes the question of the logical sense and turn it toward the future and say, how is this working? What consequences does it have? Where can it take me? Which other things allows me to plug into these, and which patterns it installs, which paths it creates, which are the victims, which are the beneficiaries, where am I standing? I am responsible, and I am, saying earlier about the art piece, and I made it, I am no longer responsible for it, but I am accountable for it at the same time. It's obviously the art piece exists by itself, but you've taken decisions in one direction or another. Those decisions make the world.
I would say that the artwork makes me accountable.
Yeah.
So
But you make it sound a little too intelligent.
like a sheep.
I know you probably don't mean to, but you just the way you speak when your decision counts, it makes it a little bit too intelligent.
No, there is
like
intuition. There are things that are not
it's the
so
small,
rational.
The small print, yeah.
Yes,
what I
yes,
call
yes,
the
absolutely.
small print convictions, which are not that intelligible, but still important. This is
Fully
why
important,
I'm
absolutely.
saying that
No,
when
no,
you have a
yeah,
stylistic
I agree. It's not
line,
a matter of
it's
his
a kind
determining.
of, it's a slippery process, an aesthetics of life, a way of being, whatever. I'm just saying. I know you didn't mean that, but it just in the way that language structures you, it makes you say things like my decisions, and your decisions do count. But at the same time, it's not just about the intelligibility, as she says in here. It's the unintelligible, the erasures, the bits that don't speak. As I talked about last week, there's something within the phrases that doesn't speak.
And in fact, that's to use an Heideggerian image there. It is precisely that which does not speak in the apparatus that counts as the most important decision. Precisely the
Silence.
Yes.
Virtual negative silence. Virtual negative silence. Interesting kind of spaces.
So can you say again this last thing you said
But
about
you can also say that it is precisely that which remains unsaid, which is an unquestioned assumption that very often is the most important, between quotation, decision in your choice.
which would be like the deconstruction policy to go.
No, not the deconstruction policy. That what you assume to be either a given or neutral or natural, it is in fact the image of the world you are projecting.
So my thesis, my PhD, is this experiential embodiment of human immediacy, the human embodiment of human immediacy is this unquestioning aspect. It's like, Lorna says that the affinity is in the dismantling of that, almost like it's called confirmation bias in the unspoken, in the unchallenged, the stuff that doesn't ring, the ready to hand, as it were, but not in the Heideggerian world, the unbroken tool wants to break his toys, break the tools, which is what this is about. It's not described to, I think, when picture, trying to understand the picture, which means
Yeah.
breaking it down. Back to aggression.
Good, I think we had a very good go at it. No?
She'll come back and
It's
say,
interesting
wrong,
what
wrong,
happens when you
you're
leave,
wrong.
Post-Doctoral
I do want to kind of
own
mention
devices.
that, you know, she is associated very much with feminist movement, with LGBT
Yeah.
queer theory movements, and she is very much writes quite a lot in always using queer, like in the book itself there is not that much queer.
No.
But there is
These
I
are his
believe-
other texts, isn't it?
There's queer
Which are
everywhere.
great. These are
Yes,
great.
but the queer is not simply on
Oh no, but what I'm
the-
saying
the-
that queer theory as such, you know, that's a kind of, I think, sometimes what you feel the slow pacing, yeah, of the text, because queer itself, if you work within the field of queer theory, there's a certain things you already think about as such, the performative gender, which is, as I was saying earlier, you know, you have illusion of substance rather than actual identity per se, yeah, which is exactly what she kind of talks about when identity comes into play, just differently, just quantum rather than social, which is Butler before. She actually kind of writes a little bit, parts that I read because I haven't finished the whole, she kind of sounds very Foucauldian sometimes, even though there is an argument again, like, instead of Foucault, but it's actually what Marx said, it's a different language at least that does the same thing. And Foucault is very often criticizing queer theory on the same ground, because in a way he is very old. The language he plays, it is very old language, and queer moved somewhere past that. And but she, that's why I kind of, you know, all those kind of things, that those identity, the kind of the everything, the relation of everything, you know, not having the truth, not confirming to what is given, you know, not having the universal umbrella, walking in a society that walks rather than in that we imagine it to be. You know, all those issues that are raised in the queer theory that you learn in the queer theory, that authors and artists walk and write about, she raises in there without saying queer. And that's why I kind of find very often that the short text, especially the interview with, because I found it so gritty and bodily, because queer also comes with the sexuality, queer also comes with AIDS, queer comes with blood, with I don't know, with she, for example, in her, which I always like, she brings her theory during her talk, which is actually kind of around the second chapter, her talk, lecture. She brings in the butch lesbian motherhood identity into play, which is, again, the kind of completely normalized processing of the mattering of the word. And so it kind of, all those things that she kind of tries to explain, they become sort of like, I feel sometimes boring in a way, because I already have that ground in a way, you know, I already have that field. There is this field that already happened, and she never mentions or not refers to even. And I think it's happening exactly what Alberto says, because there's this thing that in order for it to be understood for everyone, she needs to change what she writes. And I'm very scared of when you talked about it, that, you know, you need to dissect your research, or do like you're doing your research and you have your method of doing research, whatever it's fraction, whatever you choose to do it, and then you find out in the end it has to be this, yeah, in order for it to be readable, to actually build a responsibility towards it from other, yeah, which is for it to become kind of phenomenon, like, I think. But I kind of find that kind of problematic, because I always thought, as whatever that is, the method, the fraction, you call it fraction, you know, however you decide the research is, and there is no wrong way in a way, because if you say there is a wrong way,
there is no wrong way, but there
But I
is
was,
a-
it's
But only,
around
no.
research.
But I'm saying that as you can approach it the way you want to. It doesn't have to be just diffraction as the only way. You know, it can be many different ways. You know, even social studies they think they have merit, but but what I'm saying is that the part that you write, the body that you create from it, the mattering of that, it should work with that and be responsible to that.
because there is a risk attached to it.
Yeah, and there is a risk that, but
That's
it
the
should.
important
But
thing.
if you think that the body, the mattering of your research, the matter how becomes a mattering of your research is responsible to something that you pre-think exists, then that kind of fails the research in a way, or dribbles the research in some way, because the research you're doing is amazing in a way, but amazing, but the kind of the action, the interaction here is between the mattering of some sort, or that is already interactive, with the method of approaching a diffraction, as you call it. Yeah, so that's what's making your thesis and your PhD in a way, rather than the relation that you think of something that is already established. Right? So if you think I'm claiming knowledge to I'm changing the painting, yeah, but that already starts when there is a painting. The knowing of that, yeah. So that's why, for example, I like to use the words like expanding the field rather than challenging the field.
Because you're in it and never external to it.
In a way, that's a Foucauldian power in a way, because you never. That allows me to at the same time walk the surface, be part of the surface, and at the same time, I don't know, bulge the surface, and the surface, and fall down the surface, and become a surface, and yeah, you because there is expansion, yeah, or create an opening and expand and float out excess, yeah, fill off, rather than create a thing that, so there is a assumption that this is what it is, and I'm standing here and telling you this is not. Because that creates organization which there is a universal, and I'm arguing against it, which creates another universal in a way. That's why I'm scared of what you said about the fact that there is a wave, like line or something that you want to make, and I understand they want to make the research understandable. That's what happens with the book, the sense is very much to make it understandable for multiple approaches, to create the interaction with everything else. Yeah.
No, I'm just yeah.
Which
I
in the
understand.
sense
Understand why you're
embodies what you're
scared,
trying to
and I
say.
understand
Yeah.
why you're scared. I'm scared too. I'm not saying that this is like this is the way, but I'm also scared that if we produce something eventually, when it's to the time of the production, the projection outside, if we produce something that it just looks like anything else we've been writing out of what we read, and I'm scared that eventually we just push forward this non-mutual comprehensibility, and we actually keep on make those ramifications growing more and more, so that if I'm not familiar with the queer theory, I'm not able to read a text of queer theory. Like that is also scary to me.
Oh no, that's not what I'm saying. No. It allows for a different approach that way. You understand? Because I'd say your amoeba, if you call it amoeba, so I like that. Your amoeba attached itself to the queer amoebas already. Yeah. So it found interaction with that, and then it went attached itself to other amoebas. Yeah. But because of that, created interaction between the queer amoebas and let's say the amoebas that are not that queer, even though amoebas are queer as a creature. But either way. But so that brings into, but that amoeba knows it, and then suddenly there is another network, interaction and stuff like that makes that amoeba something, and have appearance of substance, like the proton as appearance of substance rather than actually is something. Yeah. So proton doesn't have gender. It has a gender. But, no, but what I'm saying in the kind of research, kind of, I kind of feel like in a way we have this is a submission, yeah, but that submission is not writing only. We have exhibition, we have this, we have like a film. You know, I don't have Mattia had writing in the end. You know, that was his submission, which he approached differently. He created certain relation to it that kind of worked for him in order to make that writing, to make a writing that could be thesis, you know, that is submitted as a thesis, and then it depends on how it's going to be taken as a taken from the other, yeah, because he thinks it's a thesis, we all kind of think it's a thesis, but you know, is it? And we submitting. No, I'm not. No, I'm not saying negative. You understand, because until it kind of passes the threshold of something that someone says, like, how it was acceptable, you don't know if it's acceptable or not. Until someone reacts to it, or something reacts to it as non-acceptable, it's what it is.
No,
yeah?
just it's precisely the diffraction logic.
Yeah,
It needs to encounter a response in order to show its effect. And
Exactly.
therefore
It needs to be
become
other,
repetitive
in a way.
and
Yeah.
install itself
Yeah.
ontologically. Yeah.
Can we stop it there then?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, because it's like
Well, pass some of this.
Okay.